Roll. Welcome back, Trab. I know we've been on a slight hiatus for a couple weeks, but we're back to your weekly videos on YouTube. Today, we're going to go over crawling, the importance of how to reset our body and how we could throw away the sets and reps and just focus on that position. One of the greatest things we can do if we're experiencing pain in our body or we want to build some overall strength is to get back to the basics of crawling. So many times we're so focusing on the sets and the reps of how many we can do, we lose that mind-muscle connection. We just think if we do the sets, if we do the reps, that's going to make us better, when in reality, the sets and reps are going to be adapted to each person individually on top of that. So one of the best ways we can activate the full body, realign the structure of our body, and definitely start handling issues with the shoulder, with the knee, the hip, the glutes, the low back, and even the feet, is to get back into the basics of the movement, which is crawling, something that we start as a baby. Yes, we learn how to roll over first, and there is, a lot of benefit to learning that, and we can go in that in another video. But for most of us that can get into a quadruped position or in a crawling position, that is a good place to start to help realigning that body, to help remove pain, also to help us get stronger in our tendons and in our joints, along with our muscles. And it's a ton of core strength to get into that crawl too and let the body function. Finally, the really good thing about crawling is it starts making you realize, can I move opposites together? Can I keep the engagement on the left arm and the right leg while I move the left leg and the right arm? And some of us have a hard time getting into that pattern, which once again just shows that we have a weak mind-muscle connection. If we have a weak mind-muscle connection, then we're not using all the muscles that we can. Therefore, when we recruit those muscles, we're going to get a better shape out of those muscles, we're going to get more strength out of them, and we're going to have the push and pull that naturally happens in the body to be more equal. So the first thing we're going to do is just get into the quadruped position, where we're going to go onto the hands and knees. And the big thing that we're looking for is Nadine is stacking her shoulder over wrist, and then we're going to try and get the hip under the knee, somewhere around there. And that's a good quadruped position to set up initially. First, we're going to try and see with the supported position with her hands and her knees and her feet on the ground. She does have her feet tucked. Is we're going to see if we can create some movement into the shoulder blades. The focus here is to keep the elbows locked out, and then we're going to kind of protract and retract the shoulder blades. You can also call this the cat-camel, cat-cow for all the yogis, or anything, whatever you want to call it. But we are making sure that we're pushing up and rounding the spine one way and also rounding the spine this way. She's kicking in serratus anterior on this side of your boxing muscles. That's a good thing we can do. We could also add in circles with those arms locked in, so we're creating shoulder circles, and we can create tons of different movement in the shoulder blades. We can shift side to side, so we have that weight distributed, as well as keeping the body sunk into the shoulder blades. So they're squeezed while we shift side to side, as well as protracting those shoulder blades and shifting side to side as well. Make sure that you are creating that movement that we are just exploring. That's the focus. After we get done kind of moving and separating the shoulders from the elbows, we're going to start working on this lower back too. Now, this is going to be tough for a lot of people, so I want you to focus on very, very small movement and only trying to create about 10% of effort while we do this. And we should be working all on this lower lumbar. Now, if we sit a lot during the day, this is going to be hard to do just because we lose touch of this, especially if we're obviously sitting in seats and cushions and all those fun things. But we want all that movement happening up here or down here, not up here. And then we could also do hip circles with this. So we can go Shakira style and make like our hips work in kind of a circle while we do this. And we can add in that flexion extension of the spine while we do that as well too. So kind of move those hips around, and you might find we have a little bit more tension kicking in onto that QL, where we get a lot of that single side pain for people who deadlift, and then they feel it on one side more than the other. This is a good way to kind of find a stretch into those muscles. And if you are going through those circles, maybe you find a spot where you're like, oh my gosh, that feels pretty good. And usually that's going to be that hip shifted to the side. just kind of sit and hold it there. We can breathe into that tension. Is another thing we always talking about, is we try to send the air into that tight area. Then when we exhale, we kind of stretch that muscle out a little bit. So we have that kind of cat camel, cat cow, whatever you want to call it at the top. And then we also have that 2.0 version for that lower cat cow, cat camel 2.0 on the lower part of that version. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to work on the basics of crawling. When we look at crawling, we want to look at what does a baby do? Because we don't tell a baby how to crawl, they just kind of learn it. And we need to go back to those basics. So first thing we want to do is pick that head up. We want to make sure that we fix that text neck of always looking down. Keep the head up, and with the toes tucked, knees touching the ground, and the hands, which we're going to keep this hands nice and wide spread. Try to get that 90-degree onto that thumb. Your hands can be straight forward, they can be slightly turned out, or to the side, whatever feels comfortable right now. And that's the biggest thing, is we are looking for that pain-free movement. We are just, if we're getting into that discomfort, that's okay. Remember, we never want to go above a 4 under discomfort. This means you should be able to breathe through the movement, you should be able to talk through the movement, and you should be able to keep a calm and relaxed face. So if you start wincing, start holding the breath, let off that pressure a little bit so we can get back into that normal breath control. And the first thing we're just going to do is we're going to work opposites. So she's just going to work an opposite leg, opposite arm. We're going to bring it forward and then go the next step. It doesn't have to be a big step at all. Small little baby steps, feeling the movement almost like you're not doing anything. And then we're going to go backwards as well too. Anything we can go forwards, we should be able to do backwards. And you might see that going backwards might be a little bit harder because we have to kind of change the direction of what we're doing. The next thing that we're going to go into after we get that bear crawl is we're going to go into a high bear crawl. So we're going to kind of bring the hips up nice and high. We can kind of not think too much about what's going on with the rounding of the back or anything like that. Stay more on the toes if we can. That's going to help out. The head doesn't have to be cranked up either. We can kind of use some, just use our eyes to look up, and then we're going to start walking again. So same thing, opposites. You can keep the legs pretty straight like Nadine is, or we can add a bend into those knees as well too. That's fine. Try out both. This is all about exploring movement when we're working through this. And just like she's doing, down and up, or forward and back, and then we could rest for a second, Nadine. As we get through that bear crawl and we go into that high position, we can start slowly lowering the body down. Our goal is to get the knees a couple inches off the ground in what we call low bear crawl position. So if we're going from the high bear crawl, we don't have to go directly to the low. We can go back into that high bear crawl and then just continuously add more bend to the knees. So initially, she was straight legged, she added more bend, and now her knees may be a foot off the ground. We're going to create the crawl, and then this is where we're going to start pulling the head up. We're going to try and crank that head up, look forward, and that's crucial, and then go backwards. And right now she's getting more into that low bear crawl that we're looking is a nice back that's parallel to the ground, and relax. A back that's parallel to the ground and keeping the head up. I can't stress enough how important it is to pick the head up. Everyone who starts off that bear crawl is going to be looking down. After you take 2 or 3 steps, you're either A, going to be holding your breath, or you're going to be looking down, or you're going to be doing a little bit of both. When we are doing the bear crawl, I want you to think about that core being engaged too. You should be thinking about the abs working as we take those steps. Now, if we're dealing with an issue in the shoulder, we're dealing with an issue with the knee, the glutes, the hands, the back, whatever it is, just creating the stability and being able to walk with a little bit of tension is important to get the basics of the movement. But we need to start telling the body that it can relax during that movement. So what Nadine is going to add in is she's going to add in a big sway of the hips and the shoulders as she's creating that bear crawl. So we're going to over-exaggerate that movement as we are walking, as we are crawling, of pushing the hips to the side. And what she should feel is maybe a little bit more work on some of these muscles that are coming in a diagonal onto the system, since so much of our movement inside the gym and our concrete jungle is forward, back, and up and down. So we're going to purposely put in a sway while we do this bear crawl. So we can go in that low bear crawl, and as she walks, she's just going to over-exaggerate the shoulders and the hips. And it doesn't have to even be a huge over-exaggeration. Good, and then backwards. But feel free to create that movement. Once you might find this actually feels really relaxing and calm down. And it should feel like, oh my gosh, I'm getting a stretch into that torso that my body is not used to. This is animal locomotion. We need to kind of build that stuff back. And once again, we're not focusing on sets and reps. We're focusing on feeling the core engagement. We're trying to focus on feeling the tension from our toes all the way up into our shoulders. And as we were talking about before, we are looking at not only having the shoulders reset or retracted, but also protracted when we are doing that movement. So we want those elbows. They can bend during the bear crawl. That is okay. But we want to make sure that we're not just very stiff. We want to make sure that we can get some of the motion in and almost add in all the things that we initially did when we were stable. So these shoulders going side to side. We're also looking at shoulder circles. All those little tiny things you can do, create that crawl to help kind of explore that movement. Final thing I will say, you can stand up, Nadine. The final thing that I will say too is that we can change what we're crawling on. So if we start loading bear crawl on an uphill, now our body weight is going to be pushing more towards the legs. You're going to feel it a lot more in the legs. So if we're dealing with a low back, knee, foot, hip issue, do more bear crawling up hills. Now if we're dealing more of a shoulder issue, elbow, wrist, we want to go and try and bear crawl downhill. This is going to load our body. And the more time that we have under tension in that bear crawl, the more work we're going to get into the joint and tendons, the more health we're going to bring in there. And therefore, all you have to think about is, am I in pain? And if so, we're going to try and lighten up on how much pressure we are doing that. And the way that is that if I'm directly over the shoulder or slightly or directly over the wrist or slightly in front of the wrist when I'm in the bear crawl, we're going to add a lot of load onto that shoulder and into that core. If I have the arm a little bit further back and my body weight is sunk a little bit more into the legs, we can lighten that load on the upper body. And that's one way that we can adjust the weight of what's going on there. But I highly suggest everyone should be spending a couple minutes a day trying to do a bear crawl. A simple thing, crawl 100 feet, crawl 50 feet once a day. Start off there. Then try to start seeing how much further you can go. It's going to be tough, and just cycle through your head up, and am I breathing? Head up, am I breathing? Head up, am I breathing? Those are the things I want you running through your head while you're doing those crawls, because that's the stuff that's going to change from just doing a movement to start feeling the movement, start getting pain-free in our movement, and not having to go to doctors and all those other things to try and correct our body. Crawl every day. You're going to find a lot more balance into the system, a lot more core strength, and all the other things that we said. So hope you enjoyed this video. As always, like, subscribe, and we'll see you guys next week.